Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to That D Plus Show. Class is in session for the only show from that nerdy site that lets you know what kind of quality to expect right from the name. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and each week we dive into a different Disney Plus offering and discuss its history, how it holds up today, and our general impressions of the show or movie or whatever the case may be. This show is made possible entirely by the support of our patrons over at patreon.com/thatnerdysite. So if you like the show and you can support us over there, we would definitely appreciate it. But if you can't, no big deal. The fact that you're listening is awesome. And of course, we would love it if you like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. No guest this week, just a solo show here for me. I have been playing a lot of Marvel's The Avengers on PlayStation. So this week I decided to hop into Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes, the animated show, for a few episodes of that for this week's episode of That D Plus Show. Specifically, I watched the first 4 episodes, which, if you watch them in the Disney Plus order, are not the first 4 episodes. The Disney Plus does this thing that I've noticed on a couple different shows where it annoyingly starts like midway through a season, where like all the characters have been established and whatnot, and it airs out of order basically, and I don't know why. I noticed it the first time on the new DuckTales. That one specifically started like with all the characters already introduced. I was like, this is a weird way to start this show. And then I went and looked at like the episode history, and it was like, yeah, these aren't the first episodes. Why are they showing as the first episodes? So the first episodes that Disney Plus will give you are the episodes titled Breakout, Part 1 and Part 2, which is effectively like where the Avengers are all coming together. But before that, in the original kind of like air date order and the production order, each of the Avengers, much like in the Marvel Cinematic Universe that was going on kind of around the same time as all this, each Avenger gets kind of their own introductory episode. So for the sake of this episode of That D Plus Show, I actually only sat down and watched Iron Man is Born, Thor the Mighty, Hulk versus the World, and Meet Captain America. This version of the Avengers does include Ant-Man and the Wasp, so the following episode, the 5th episode, is kind of their introductory episode, and then they go into the Breakout, where those 2 episodes where the Avengers kind of get assembled effectively. But I did not have the time to get to all of those episodes for this week's show. So just these 4 episodes. Gonna kind of just chat a little bit, brief impressions about them. This will probably be a relatively short episode, as these kind of solo episodes often are. But diving into a little bit of the history lesson for this. This series originally ran between September 22nd, 2010 was when it originally aired, through and there are varying dates provided. Per IMDb, it kind of ran through November 11th, 2012 is when like the final episode aired. But if you dig in a little deeper, Wikipedia actually gives you a date of May 5th, 2013. And effectively what happened there is there was an episode that was kind of like originally produced that didn't air in the original run of things because it was going to kind of serve as the setup for a season 3 storyline that season 3 was never granted. It got canceled before that. So it didn't. So this episode, I believe, titled Powerless, that was going to kind of explore Silver Surfer, it sounds like, did not originally air in the original run of the show, and was added as kind of like a DVD extra, and it eventually aired after the fact, after the series was wrapped in 2013 there. So that's kind of the weird little discrepancies there. Animation does a lot of weird things like that, as I'm finding. Again, like I said, the fact that on the system or on the network it's airing out of order and all that kind of stuff, it's just weird. I'm confused. Anyway, other notable releases of 2010 on the animation side of things that I've pulled in here that's when Adventure Time started. This is also when one of the latest versions of Scooby-Doo. I want to give a shout out to Jazz Foster, because I saw this and I was like, oh well, I got to include this one. Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated, which I believe is I think it's her favorite iteration of the Scooby-Doo kind of franchise. That came out in 2010. And then on the DC side of things, this was when Young Justice started airing. Episodes are 30 minutes, so 25-ish minutes of animation here per episode. And then in the Disney timeline of things, this is one of the first Marvel shows that ended up premiering on Disney XD following the Disney acquisition of Marvel back in 2009. So yeah, like I said, this started airing in 2010. It was already in production going back as early as 2008, so it was kind of in the slate of things that Disney acquired, and it was one of the first ones that they ended up actually airing themselves. And then was later followed by Ultimate Spider-Man, which ran from 2012 to 2017, Avengers Assemble, all of these on Disney XD in particular. Avengers Assemble ran from 2013 to 2019. Hulk and the Agents of Smash ran 2013 to 2015, and Guardians of the Galaxy ran 2015 to 2019. A little bit of who's who in this series. Didn't really dive into kind of the directors and writers because it's just a little weird on animation here. But as far as the starring, you have kind of a few members of the core cast. This is a very, voice actor driven thing, so lots of actors are in there playing multiple roles in multiple different episodes. Like I saw Troy Baker, while not playing any of the main characters, is in 17 of the show episodes of the show. So he was pretty high in the IMDb credits list, and I was like, oh, neat. But in terms of kind of some of the core Avenger cast, you have Eric Loomis here playing Iron Man. Who has also gone on to play Iron Man in many of the games, like Marvel's Capcom, or Marvel vs. Capcom, as well as Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3. He is notably, of course, not playing Iron Man in Marvel's Avengers. That would be Nolan North. Colleen O'Shaughnessy is playing the Wasp, which, again, I have not actually been introduced to yet. But she has a very prolific voice career, doing lots of cartoons and games work over the years, including one of her most prominent roles seemed to be Danny Phantom, which I have not seen, but I have heard of. And then she was also, I thought this was funny, she is the voice of Tails in 2020's Sonic the Hedgehog movie, which, yeah, Sonic the Hedgehog came out in 2020. That's how long this year has been. Brian Bloom plays Captain America here. Much like Loomis, he's played Cap in a lot of the recent games, including Marvel's Ultimate Alliance. And he is also notably the voice of BJ Blazkowicz in the recent Wolfenstein games. So I thought that was a fun little tie-in that you've got Captain America also being the very violent Nazi killer in the Wolfenstein games. Rick D. Wasserman plays Thor here, and also in Ultimate Alliance 3. And then Chris Cox plays Hawkeye, and again plays Hawkeye in Ultimate Alliance 3. So a lot of the... I thought it was very interesting kind of going through this cast and seeing how many of these actors kind of have carried their roles into that space, into the gaming space, be it through many of these people played their characters in various Marvel vs. Capcom games, but then almost all of these were also in Ultimate Alliance 3, which I played last year. A little bit of trivia for the series. When development started on the show in 2008, there was concern about launching the show with Captain America as the leader of the team. Great deal of research showed that Cap was met with a lot of negativity outside of the United States. I'm sure that would just go even further kind of in this day and age. But so to give people a chance to know the character, it was decided to have Iron Man, whose popularity had skyrocketed at the time due to Iron Man the film in 2008. He was going to lead the team. Most importantly, they wanted to mirror the original Stan Lee and Jack Kirby run and form the Avengers using the original 5 members and have Cap join later after they discover him in the ice. The lost episode Powerless that I mentioned earlier was not aired on Disney XD because it progressed a storyline with the Silver Surfer that was going to be further explored. That was not going to be further explored since the series would not get a 3rd season. It premiered on the Season 2 Part 1 DVD in 2012 and was not aired on Disney XD until 2013. So that's what I was kind of touching on earlier. As far as this show, does it hold up? How does it hold up kind of here in 2020? It's very interesting seeing kind of this alternate take on building the Avengers kind of characters, especially given the meteoric success of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But still, I appreciate that like it realized that because when these episodes started airing, we'd probably still only just gotten like Iron Man 1 and 2 because the Avengers film didn't come out until 2012. I think it was like this was back when only one Avengers movie was coming out a year kind of thing. I think Iron Man 1 came out in 2008. I don't think Iron Man 2 came out until 2010. I think it was like Iron Man and Hulk happened in 2008, and then there was a 2-year gap before Iron Man 2 and Captain America and Thor started coming out to introduce the other Avengers to the team. So the idea here of still kind of like mirroring that strategy of like, well, before we just kind of throw the team together here. It's something you could certainly probably get away with now, given the success of the MCU. But for trying to introduce a new audience to this, introducing kind of one character at a time, introducing your Iron Man, and then Iron Man's kind of like family of characters, and then introducing Thor and some of his other characters, and kind of going through to deal out the audience, deal the information out to the audience in spoonfuls. I thought was a good strategy here. I'm kind of curious actually to go back and sit and see like, okay, how do they introduce Ant-Man and the Wasp in the next episode, and then what do they do to bring the whole team together? One of the things that I had actually, since I'd never seen the show or anything like that, I actually weirdly got exposed to it a couple weeks ago via Twitter when somebody posted something to the effect of like the Avengers Earth's Mightiest Hero themes did not have to go as hard as it did, and they kind of showed that video, and it was just like, it's a really good intro theme song kind of thing. So shout out to that, because yeah, like as soon as like these episodes started booting up and I heard that, I was like, oh yeah, I remember seeing this a few weeks ago. This really is good. And it's in the same way that I love one of the things I love about going to My Hero Academia on anime, which is certainly not my forte, but one of the things I love about that show is the intro and outro numbers that they have on that series. They change that one up certainly more frequently, but it just makes me like I'm almost nostalgic for good intro theme songs. Obviously growing up with stuff like the Avengers, or not the Avengers, the X-Men and Spider-Man, and even stuff like Power Rangers and stuff that just have like such indelibly like ingrained intro themes in my head. Pokemon, of course, being another iconic one. It was a nice throwback to something that I feel like we don't often get anymore these days. But so that was a cool thing I liked. I liked kind of the differences from the MCU. Obviously the MCU makes a lot of adaptations to the original kind of source material, whereas this felt in a lot of ways like it was trying to stay a little bit more true to certain aspects. Like in particular in the Captain America episode, Bucky is the original version of Bucky that is more like kid Robin Boy Wonder sidekick to Captain America versus the Sebastian Stan version that we get in the MCU, and so that was like an interesting little and a fun little kind of like in honor of the storyline there, and certainly I'm curious to see how that plays out when he inevitably will, of course, certainly come back into play sometime throughout as the Winter Soldier and all that stuff. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. Some of the I feel like the Thor episode of these four was probably like the weakest of the bunch, just because it felt like he was fighting a whole bunch of like no-name kind of people until he got kind of like wrangled into the Asgard side of things. And then there are elements in like each of these kind of like introductory stories that just feel like they are weird carbon copies of the MCU versions. Obviously Thor being like, I must, Midgard needs my help more than Asgard does, so I'm going to spend most of my time there. And of course, he meets Jane Foster and all that stuff. And Loki's, aligning with the Frost Giants or something like that. It's there are enough echoes to the MCU that it all feels weirdly familiar, but also like in a weirdly bizarro kind of version of events. But I enjoyed them. They feel slower than I would like, but it's also maybe of the time or more of the time. Especially it's hard because the other immediate kind of comparison I'm drawing to these is the most immediate thing that I've watched animation wise. Otherwise, is the DC Harley Quinn series, which is much more fast paced, has a lot more humor to it, has a lot of fun jokes and kind of like more levity, and also just a sharper wit to it. Same with DuckTales, is another one that I've watched here on Disney Plus. There's just so much of a modern sensibility to those series that is building off of the more live action side of television from the last 10 years, and this one very much feels more like this would have felt just as at home, it seems, in late 90s early 2000s as it does in 2010. The After a long Labor Day weekend of playing Marvel's Avengers, I was a little sleepy when I first sat down to start watching these episodes, and the first episode of Iron Man was putting me to sleep. That I was just like, I need to go take a nap and then come up, watch these episodes and record. So like there was just a slowness to the series that isn't bad. It was just not necessarily what I'm looking for. I would like a much more fast paced kind of thing. That said, the action sequences are fun for an animated kind of a cartoon series and stuff like that. So yeah, I ultimately I had a good time. Certainly would recommend this, especially if as a fun alternative introduction. If you're a fan of the Avengers, obviously you've got the MCU films, you've got now the video game that you can play, but this introduction to these characters is another fun take on kind of their stories. So certainly check it out if you feel so inclined. A little bit, or I guess on the report card side of things, I will give this a solid, I would say a solid B plus. Doesn't quite reach A territory, just because I think that the modern sensibilities I'm looking for in this would elevate it to that level for me. But if I had seen this in kind of that block of cartoons growing up with X-Men and Spider-Man and Avengers Assemble or kind of thing, or Avengers Earth Mightiest Heroes, I'm sure it would have been just as ingrained in my mind as some of that other stuff. As far as extra credit, other suggestions that Disney Plus will offer you if you like this one, all from the animated side of things. You have the Avengers United They Stand series. You have Avengers Assemble, Avengers Secret Wars, Marvel Superhero Adventures, Marvel Spider-Man, Iron Man, The Incredible Hulk, and Guardians of the Galaxy. No surprise there. Also, I ran into this issue. I don't know if this was if this is my PS4 acting up or if this was like a Disney Plus app thing, but like when I tried going to this series twice by going into Disney Plus and going to the Marvel section and like going down and to animated and then scrolling over to Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes, because I was like, that's what I want to do for this week's episode. And each time I tried doing that, like the app crashed, and so I actually had to go into like the search to find it outside of like the little like click through these kinds of options, and I had to basically type in Avengers, and then find it from that search menu, all on the PS4 app. So that was weird. It was a weird little side tangent thing, but overall, it was a nice way to spend a couple hours of my evening, taking a break from playing Avengers on my PS4. So that's going to do it for this week's episode of That D Plus Show. Thank you for joining me to talk about or to hear about my impressions of the 2010 Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes animated series. You can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey, and I would go ahead and give a shout out to this week's, aka yesterday's, if you're listening to this the day this goes live, episode of That Nerdy Site Show, where I go into kind of my extended impressions of the Avengers on PlayStation 4, or just kind of Marvel's Avengers from Crystal Dynamics. I'm playing it on PlayStation 4. You can follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site at That Nerdy Site. And if you'd like to be part of the show, you can tweet me at Trevor J. Starkey. Let me know what you want to come on and talk about, or you can go to thatnerdysite.com/D+guest and fill out a little Google form there. If you liked what you heard, please, once again, like, rate, review, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. And if you do feel so inclined, you can always support us on Patreon at patreon.com/thatnerdysite. Thank you for joining us, or joining me. As always, stay nerdy, be good to each other, and class dismissed.